Hey, welcome back to Dear Baseball Gods. This is episode 68. And my guest today is Pete Maki, who is the minor league pitching coordinator for the Minnesota Twins. And I want to have Pete on today because he's got a really interesting background and he is a longtime coach and actually just made the leap from the college ranks into the professional ranks just a year ago. So this will be his second season with the Twins as their pitching coordinator. So I'm personally curious to learn firsthand what a pitching coordinator does. You hear the term a lot. It's a pretty high ranking coaching job within a major league organization, and it comes with a lot of responsibilities. So he's going to tell us a little bit today about his up and coming career with the Twins, in addition to how he made it there. So his behind the scenes from being a player. He was an alumni of Franklin and Marshall College in Lancaster, PA, and then went on to coach at New Haven University, and then Columbia University for 8 years, and then finally at Duke University before he was signed away by the Twins. So really excited to have Pete, who hails from Durham, North Carolina, here on the show today. So without further ado, check out our conversation today with Pete Maki. All right, so we're here with Pete Maki. How are you today? And number one, thanks for being on the show. And tell me about Durham. So Christmas in North Carolina is coming up, huh?
Yeah, man. Hey, Dan, thanks for having me. Yeah, Christmas in Durham, North Carolina. We got some snow last week, and it hung around for quite a while. So it felt like Christmas for a little while. Today it's gonna be about 60, and the snow's all gone. So back to normal climate for
Well,
this
so
part of
you
the country.
so you grew up a little bit north, correct?
Yes, I grew up a couple of places up north. We lived in Glens Falls, New York. Lived in Bradford, PA, and then Connecticut as well. My last couple of years of high school was in Connecticut. That's where my parents still live. That's where my wife is from. And they're Northeasterners too. They're from Massachusetts. So you could call me a Yank, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're once a Yankee, you're always a Yankee. You know, if we went back to Civil War times, I don't think anyone would agree that you could fight for the South. I mean, you're a transplant. You're a transplant.
So definitely a transplant, like many people in the Raleigh-Durham area are.
So I have an important question with Christmas coming up. Are you real tree
Yes.
people or are you fake tree people?
Real tree, real tree. That's something I'll dig my heels in for real tree and pay the 70, $80 or whatever it is for a real tree.
Well, I've
Like the
heard,
smell. It's worth the
yeah,
smell.
pine smell is amazing. It's probably the number one thing I look forward to at the holidays. Besides, I that's it's probably like eighth on my list of things I look forward to.
Okay,
But
all
it's
right.
a it's
I
a
was gonna
it's a
say.
it's a good holiday byproduct. Plus, I've heard statistics show Santa is like 33% more likely to come to your house if you have a real tree. So I don't know
Okay,
where
I
they
don't,
get
I
their
don't, I
numbers,
don't know
but
where you got that study, but
I think it was Columbia University.
okay, doesn't surprise me.
Your alma mater. So let's go back. Your playing career started. You were at Franklin and Marshall in Lancaster, PA, and I spent some time in Lancaster. So how did you enjoy your time there? It's an interesting city for sure.
Yeah, I had a great time in Lancaster. It's a unique town in that it's a city, but it's in the middle of Amish country. So when you're in Lancaster, and you must say Lancaster, or else you'll be exposed as an outsider. I used to
Yeah,
call it Lancaster, and that's when they know you're not from there. Like any town in Massachusetts, right? Like if you say Billerica, you're done. If you say Peabody, you're done for. You're exposed as an outsider. But anyway, Lancaster is a cool town. I haven't been back in many years, unfortunately, just because whenever there's been an alumni event or reunion, I've been on the college side, coaching on the college side, and there's always a recruiting event, always your own fall practices. So I'm hopeful I can get back there soon, but and it's been a decade plus, unfortunately, since I've been back. But uh, did really enjoy my time at F&M and in the city of Lancaster. It's a cool town.
and so you're now as the Twins minor league pitching coordinator. I mean, you're a big deal I'm sure as an
I don't know about
alumni,
that.
I mean, all right. But you've had a pretty interesting journey since there. So you were an assistant coach at University of New Haven
That's
after
right. Yeah.
college, and then you moved on from there to be coach at Columbia University for a long time, and then after
Hmm.
that on to Duke, and then after a couple seasons at Duke, you are now the with the Twins. So tell me a little bit about that journey, because I know I have a lot of parents and former coaches and current coaches who listen to the podcast, and I'm always personally really interested at just people's journeys. So did you ever think you were going to be where you are today, and give me a little rundown?
Well, to answer the last question first, like, no, I didn't. If you were to ask me when I was 20 years old, was I going to get into coaching? I'd probably say no, actually. I was always passionate about the game and loved the game, but a lot of people love the game. And the coach I had in college, Brett Beretti, was a guy who's um, different than me personality wise and style. And that was like the guy who, I would measure myself up to as a coach. I say, well, I'm not really the same type of style as him. Does that mean I can't be a coach? I don't know. I didn't know what I didn't want to get into coaching right away. I wanted to be involved in the game. I wanted to work for a big league club, or be a scout, but I wasn't like compelled to be a coach when I was a player. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's something that came about. I was coaching high school baseball and high school basketball as an assistant on a volunteer basis, and was trying to do the real estate thing. Not too many people want to make the most important financial decision of their lives with a 22, 23-year-old kid, so that didn't work out too great. And I got a call from Coach Beretti one day that his buddy Raph Serrato was looking for a pitching coach at the University of New Haven, a D2 school in Connecticut. And what with the real estate industry and how that was going, I was like, yeah, I'm in. I'll do whatever. I want to get back. I want to get back in, and I missed it. Um, so that's how I started out at New Haven. Was as a volunteer pitching coach, um, and Rafael Serrato and Frank Vieira, the head coach at the time, were the guys who gave me my first gig, an opportunity, which, you know, you take it for granted sometimes, but it's tough to get that first job in
Yeah.
baseball, and all too often it's a job for no pay, no pension, and you have to find another way to support yourself. Which, I substitute taught and lived at home while I was coaching at New Haven. So that's how I got my start.
So tell
Um,
me a little bit about, because I'm always curious. So when you obviously get a new job, you have to get trained or this and that. But as a pitching coach, like no one's going to say, hey, here's how you become a pitching coach. Like they just expect you to do that job. So when you suddenly had your first coaching job after being a player your whole life, like
mhm.
what did you do? You show up to school and you're like, all right, I'm the pitching guy. I have to get all these pitchers to, like be good at pitching. Uh, like, did you sit down and just make a manual? Did you like what does a person do when they're a brand new coach?
I think what you do when you're a brand new coach is you rely on what you knew as a player and what your coaches before told you. And that's where everybody starts as a coach, is you rely on your playing experience. Mine was pretty limited. Um, I was a young coach, which means not that good a player. Um, and you rely on what you learned from your coaches. So, and after that point, I think if you want to develop and keep getting better, you have to learn from your pitchers and your experiences with your pitchers. And a lot of times early on, it's, you know, trials,
Yeah.
um, experimentation. See if this works. Let's see if this works. What's the pitcher's feedback? That helps out a lot once you start to realize that as you get older, it's less and less about your experience and more about what works and feedback you get from your pitchers. So it's tough early. Like, I look back at what I was doing with pitchers when I was 24, 25, and some things that I didn't, I wasn't the best version of myself. And, for better or worse, in 5 years from now, hopefully I look back and say, find things that we're teaching and pushing right now that, we've improved upon or changed our mind on.
Yeah, I think it's tough to get out of that shell. And I was actually listening to an audiobook last night, and the guy was talking about, as far as like, it's a book about finances and like wealth and like investments, all this stuff, different stuff. And he was talking about people's clothes, and he said how it's interesting that people will often get stuck in a time period with their clothing because maybe that was like the best period of time in their life, or where they felt like they were the most important. So he just mentioned a bunch of different people. Like, this is maybe why, this guy who was a really successful banker in the 80s, and he wore these type of weird suits. And 20 years later, he's like not really evolving with the times, and he's not really adapting to new technology or whatever it is, but he's still wearing those suits because that to him was like his golden era. And I think a lot of coaches probably fall prey to that too, where they did certain things as a player, like maybe they were, highly successful at some point in their playing or coaching career, and then maybe they just get bogged down teaching the same things that they, you know, did at their best or did when they
Right.
played. And I think it can be probably difficult to move on and to challenge your own ideas. And I know for me personally, it sometimes just feels awkward when you're like, yeah, so everything I've been doing was kind of wrong. So how do
Yeah.
I how do I move on and change without anyone knowing? you know?
Yeah, it requires some pride swallowing and reduced ego, no question. And there's certainly value in what a coach used to do as a player. Like, that experience is important. I don't want to take away from using experience as a player to help you as a coach, because there's something to be said for that. But like you said, that it's a must that you continue to grow and evolve, and make sure you're just getting better every year. I don't want to be teaching the same things 5, 10 years from now, or maybe the same things but framed better. Version number 3 and 4 of the same idea that gets more buy-in, that more people understand quicker.
hmm
That's my hope.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit. So your next gig after New Haven was Columbia, and that's interesting
Mhm.
to me because that's Ivy League, obviously. So you have some
Mhm.
incredible players, obviously, and who are just probably brilliant minds and exceptional students.
Mhm.
Just tell me a little bit about what it's like to be an Ivy League baseball player.
Well, I wasn't a player there, so I can't speak from that lens. But uh, having been there for 8 years, it's a very special place, really, to play baseball, because it's high level baseball. It's Division I baseball, but it's top 10 type schools in the nation, and there's just a small amount of kids in this country who can really read and write and really play.
Yeah.
So it's neat to be around uh, that type of player in person. And um, when the parents, not I have kids now, and I think about these parents. They must be so proud of their kids who are athletes at an Ivy League school. It's like, it's cliched to say, but best of both worlds. It really is. So, if I ever get a cousin or a nephew or whoever asking me for counsel on choosing schools, I'm like, if you get a chance to go to an Ivy League school and play a sport, do that. I mean, that's, the odds of playing professionally and having a career where you don't have to work afterwards, I mean, we know
Yeah.
what the odds are. So
Crazy slim.
to get a good degree that lasts you your lifetime. I mean, it's just super valuable. So, but I loved working with those players and the staff and the people at that university. Was really fun, and I try not to take it for granted. Like the kids you're working with, they're pretty impressive people in general, and I mean, if you spend enough time in one place, you can always start to take things for granted. But I would always try to remember that, like, hey, these are special kids. They're really good at baseball, and they're really smart, bright people who have really good future ahead of them.
Yeah. And so then you went on to Duke. And so
Hmm.
huge step down to Duke. No, just kidding. I mean, you had incredible academic schools the whole way.
Same
Um,
same type of kid, same type of
yeah.
really special student athlete and kid to work with. The same, but in the ACC, so you're up in the ante there on the level of baseball. Um, Duke's it's an awesome school in its own right, on the same level as Ivy schools.
hmm So you coached a lot of great players, obviously, throughout your time. What were some of the commonalities that you could identify between some of the higher performers, whether it's like an attitude thing, like a character thing, like a work ethic? Like what would you say that united some of the best college players that you coached over the years?
Namely good sliders. That's gonna just kidding. Kind of. Commonalities. I think just a passion and joy for the game that comes from a good place. I think that uh, is a common theme you find in guys who play after college. Um, you know, Loving the game and taking joy in pitching uh, for itself, in and of itself. Not doing it because it gets you this or gets you that, or because mom or dad wanted you to do it. I think that's a common theme you see with guys who are the best and go on to play afterwards. I said sliders before, but obviously the talent level is uh, really important, and you can't play at the highest levels without the talent, the big fastball, the good secondary pitches, the command, which we all work on every day. But some of it um, comes down to your talent level as well.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
so
So how do you classify yourself as a coach? So obviously you continue to progress up the ladder, from Division 2 school to a couple highly ranked Division 1 schools, and then obviously we'll talk about your pro days now. So you continue to excel as a coach. I mean, you've got some impressive numbers with your team's strikeout numbers, their rankings nationally, and strikeout to walk ratios with Columbia and with Duke. So you made big overhauls to everywhere you pretty much set foot. Um, but like, what kind of coach are you? Like a high energy guy? You a low energy guy? You just like a throw some snark out there kind of guy? You go out there and grab him by the collar on the mound kind of guy? Like, tell me who Pete Mackey is.
um, that's a big question, dude.
Listen,
Let's
bro,
see,
I'm
what
here to
type
ask
of
the big
coach are you?
questions.
I try to treat players and coaches how I'd want to be treated. Um, I guess that's a little corny, but um,
So you're the Jesus of
I always.
coaches.
What's that?
You're the Jesus of coaches.
I am not saying that in any stretch.
Let the record show that he did not say that.
Right. No, I think if you come from a good place, and like we were just talking about with who advances as players, uh, you know, coming from a good place, comes from within, comes internally. Like I think um, I want to help guys get better. I want to help coaches get better. I want to help players get better. Um, and it so long as it's genuine and comes from a good place, I think players dig that. Um, I think that's very important. It's not the content of the message. It's more about the presentation of the content, um, that gets you buy-in from players. It allows you to form relationships with players and staff, and so it was a big question. I'm going to give you a broad, big answer without specifics, but I do feel like that's the building block.
Okay, so if I'm hearing you correctly, it's a lot about how you relate to guys and just, you know, forming those relationships and how you can kind of get your message across. Like you think like that's kind of like the
Yes.
bigger. Am I kind of hearing you right?
Yeah, I mean, if you don't have trust from the player, if you don't have a relationship with the player, the info doesn't matter. Um, and it's important to always realize, because you can have the best ideas and they can all be vetted and corroborated by science and data, but if you don't have um, a good way to deliver that message, then it won't get to the player the way you want it to.
Yeah.
So, that's super important in coaching, is relationships and having trust in order to be able to relay the information that you want to get to the player. That's huge.
Gotcha. So speaking of data, obviously like baseball is changing at all levels, and I know in the minor leagues especially, they need guys who can start to relay and sort through that data and start to kind of unite analytics departments with players, with coaches, and get everyone speaking a similar language and buy in with the front office. So, did you
Mm-hmm.
start to do any of the higher tech stuff towards your tail end at Duke, and has that sort of helped you as you entered the Twins?
No doubt, yes. So we were at Duke. We had Rapsodo machines when they were still in like the beta testing phase. So
Okay.
Rapsodo gave these machines to us at Duke, Clemson. I think South Carolina had some, but there were like 4 or 5 colleges that had Rapsodo machines. So I was very fortunate in that I got to play around with this techie stuff before it was available to the public, and I learned it by trial and experimentation. Um, so yeah, we had Rapsodo machines pretty early on at Duke, and then at Duke we got a TrackMan machine installed. Um, my last, I don't know, 6 months to a year there, we had TrackMan. So I actually got more comfortable and familiar with Rapsodo before TrackMan, as it were. But by the time I left there, we had both, so I had some familiarity um, with how to take that info and use it in game planning, pitch calling, um, identifying pitcher strengths. Um, so yeah.
So take me through the TrackMan a little bit. So obviously, for you listening, if you don't know what a Rapsodo is it's a pretty innovative company. They have a smaller device. It's more portable. You can kind of put it on a tripod, and it basically just takes images, right, of the ball flight,
It
and
does.
it reads the velocity, reads the spin axis. It gives you a bunch of different readouts of exactly what the ball is doing in space. So you can say, hey, that slider wasn't as tight, or however you'd want to say it in baseball
Mm-hmm.
slang, based
Yeah.
on the spin data, the spin axis, the spin rate, all that stuff. And then TrackMan is like the way more expensive, bigger, more powerful version of that. Is
About
that
40 G's. Yep.
an accurate way to describe it? So how does the format? Like I've seen a Rapsodo. We had it actually demoed twice in our facility here. The Rapsodo people came out here, and Alan Nathan, who has advised with them, he's a U of I professor, and he's like one of the big physics of baseball experts in the world. He's right down the street from us. So they came up here twice, so I'm a little familiar with the Rapsodo. But how does the readout and TrackMan, like, what does that look like when you get all that data? How do you like get into a usable format? Do they give you an Excel sheet? Is it like how does that get into your hands?
All right. So we're lucky enough to have TrackMan data um, filtered, scrubbed, and cleaned in-house, and it shows up in our in-house software program that it's you don't have to spend any time in Excel uh, looking at different pitches. So that's a huge advantage. A lot of teams in pro ball have similar programs, but so
can you
the
elaborate on
track.
that a little bit for me? Because I personally don't know, but what does that mean to scrub, clean, Lysol your data?
So I guess, and there's other like programs that like PitchGrader is a program um, that takes the TrackMan info. It makes it look better. It puts it in um, it makes it visually pleasing. So instead of saying this guy's vertically induced break is X, and just to see a number, it can show up on a movement plot. Where you can see it as a plotted pitch,
Okay,
as
that makes
opposed to
sense.
just a negative 10.5.
Gotcha.
Um, and that's what Rapsodo, that's what you get on a Rapsodo reading or a bullpen. You got the iPad and you can see. Um, it'll show you, among other things, where the pitch moved based on the spin.
Okay, follow-up question. How many Rapsodos did you destroy while at Duke? Because one of my big concerns when they demoed that, and I was like, look, this thing's cool, uh, but like we have kids that will throw a ball in like literally every nook and cranny of our cage. I mean, they'll throw a slider 12 feet high behind a batter's head. So I'm like, I'll give this 2 months before it gets hit square in the camera and is destroyed forever. Did you guys have any problems with that?
Yeah, early on, you have to worry about, uh, misfire pitches don't read well, so that's something that will frustrate you if you got a guy who doesn't know where the ball's going and he's spraying it all over the place. You won't get accurate reads. It'll record the velo, but it won't record the spin. Um, when we first had the machine, it didn't come with like a protective box.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, I was worried that, if you had a bad misfire, something sail on you, or guys playing catch on the line while someone's throwing a pen, it gets hit, it could have easily broken. Nothing ever happened where we had a damaged device or anything. But it was a little wonky early on. It was, when we first got it, we couldn't use it like if it was too bright. Like it had to be like a partially cloudy day, and it took too long. The wireless function took like 15 to 20 seconds to show the reading on the screen. So dude would throw a pitch, and it would just be thinking and waiting and waiting and waiting. And we're trying to
Yeah.
throw a bullpen, and we got 2 hours or whatever we got for this indie period. And we're trying to do Rapsodo pens, but the thing keeps thinking. So early on wasn't ideal, but it got way better, and to the point now where there's no time impediments based on the wireless function not working, and you can use it in the sun or in the shade. So
We will pitch in the shade. Yeah, was that from from 300? You
yeah,
know that scene where like he's like, well, Xerxes' army, they have so many archers. Like, then we will fight in the shade. I think that's how I picture you guys at Duke with your Rhapsodos. Um,
yeah.
and so let's talk about your jump into pro ball. So we'll get back to the technology, but just personnel wise, just like procedurally, I mean, was it a big change going from the college game to the pro game?
Yes and no. It's the scope is much larger now. Like, we have 100 some odd pitchers. Used to having 16 to 18 pitchers, so that's a pretty big increase in number of overall pitchers. You know, Staff. My job as a coordinator is more to manage your staff than it is the players. That's not to say you can't work with players one-on-one and have a direct impact that way, but I'm not with Cedar Rapids or Rochester for more than 2 or 3 series a year. So I think the best coordinators I'm talking like I'm an expert. I've done it for a year, but I think you get the most out of your players if you take the lens of work. You need to work with your coaches first and foremost. Those are your people. Um, those are the guys you got to be in touch with on a regular basis, and being a sounding board for them, and helping them out when they have questions or issues with certain guys. Um, so that's the biggest difference, really, is that, you know, in college you have a staff of 16 to 18 guys. You're working with your pitchers directly every day. And in the pro side, it's because of the numbers. You work with, as a coordinator, at least you work with coaches just as much, if not more, than individual players one-on-one.
Okay, so if I was, you were interviewing me to be your replacement as pitching coordinator for the Twins, how
Mm-hmm.
would you describe the job to me? If I said, I don't know anything about it, Pete, tell me what it's like.
Okay, good question.
Because I don't know what it's like. I'm curious.
All right, so I think it's equal parts logistics and equal parts performance. And sometimes one will take more of your time one week, and another will take more of your time another week. And by that, on the logistics side, I mean there's obviously many levels. In a minor league, or a big league organization, and there's a lot of shuffling and shifting around that needs to happen throughout the year. Guy gets hurt, got to put him on the DL. Someone from low A needs to come up to replace him on the roster in Fort Myers. And there's things like that happen almost every day. Not necessarily due to injury, but maybe a promotion. Maybe a guy's ready to make the jump to the next level. We have to promote him. Well, who takes his spot? So there's always shuffling back and forth between levels. And there's sometimes play 13 innings in Fort Myers, 13-inning game, use 4 pen arms. Tomorrow we only have 2 available. I don't like to go into any game with only 2 pen arms available, especially if the starter has a short start. Then you're screwed. So,
Yeah.
so monitoring that in season is an important part of the job. Takes time, takes organization, just to make sure you're covered every night. And to kind of answer your question, your earlier question, that's a big difference between the college and pro side, is that there's games every day.
Yeah.
And you have 13 arms. So in college, you play 5 games a week at most, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then Tuesday, Wednesday. It's 5 at most, and you have more than 13 arms. You typically have 16 to 18. So there's never an issue in college of like, we got to cover this game. We don't have enough pitchers to get through this midweek game. Well, hopefully not. But
Yeah.
So getting off on a tangent, logistics, and then the performance side is, how are we helping guys get better? How are we helping this guy's breaking ball? How are we helping this guy's fastball strike rates, miss percentage? What are we doing to increase sync? What are we doing to improve carry? What are we doing to help a guy get better at holding the ball? Or maybe he's thrown 2 pick throws down the right field line in the past week. Like anything on the field related to help players, that's, the other part of the job. So I guess
So it
that's
sounds like
go
so
ahead.
it sounds like you sort of monitor the whole organization in the minor leagues, and you look for problems, both from like the lineup side, from who's available on the pen side, what guys are doing, and then any potential issues. So how does that does that seem like a fair assessment? So you're just like an air traffic controller, as
Yeah,
well as
I mean,
making sure the planes are up to par and,
that's
and,
part of
and
it.
capable of flying.
No doubt. That is definitely part of it in season, and definitely part of the day-to-day is just roster management, and making sure we got enough guys to cover innings every day. And yeah, that's a big part of it. And then you get rainouts, right? You get like Rochester,
Yeah.
or get snow out, or cold it out, if that's a word or a term. Well, what does that mean? It means doubleheaders coming up somewhere down the line, and we have to fly someone in to cover doubleheader. Can we do one of those games with the bullpen? Kind of asking your bullpen to do a lot to cover a whole game. So luckily, we have doubleheaders. We do 2 sevens, which I had no idea that was the case. But that happened in minor league baseball. But
Yeah.
so that helps us out. If we have doubleheaders, if we get rain on Tuesday, we get a doubleheader Wednesday. We won't play 2 nines the next day. We'll play 2 sevens. So that's helps us with the pitching a little bit.
Yeah, that's a big thing, because I know a guy only played indie ball, and when we would have, we didn't have any replacements ever coming in. Like our team was just our team. So when we did get hurt by rainouts or hurt by a couple starters not going deep, and then we had a double header, 2 nines is like the longest day of your life, number one. And if your
Tell me
starters
about it.
are down, you got 8 bullpen innings. If they each go 5 each, like it'll crush you, and then you just can't recover as a independent team where no one's going to help you. So
Yeah,
how do you do that where, like, you've been talking about logistics a lot, but obviously, like, you're not going to know necessarily that you need someone else until the night of. So, it's 10 o'clock, the game just ends, they just destroy their bullpen, and the coach calls you, says, hey, Pete, like, we only have 2 arms tomorrow. How do you get a
yes.
guy there by game time the next day? Like, how does that work?
Oh, yeah, we have a pretty good system in place. We have a travel coordinator's a stud, and gets things done in short order. And it's sometimes he's getting there during BP the next day, and had to take a flight where he connected and sat for 3 hours, and it's not ideal, for the pitcher sometimes. I can remember a couple times we had a guy come pitch for us in AAA in Durham, and I don't know, he maybe got 2 hours of sleep because we didn't know we were going to need him until really late, and I think they were getting back from a road trip, and a guy shows up on 2 hours of sleep and throws a gem, and that's something that people sitting in the stands didn't know.
Yeah.
Nobody knew that. And I'm in the dugout watching this guy saying, this guy is on fumes right now, and he's dealing. This is impressive.
Well, fumes
So
and
it's
probably
tough.
like
It's
3
tough.
monsters. Yeah. And so you're traveling during the season to, like, tell me about your travel schedule. Like, where would we find Pete on, any given weekend? So
All
you're
right.
always in the dugout?
I do sit in the dugout. I also like to get behind the dish too. It depends. There's value to sitting in the dugout and talking to your pitching coaches in the dugout and getting a feel for the environment in the dugout and what's being talked about in between innings between pitcher and catcher. And then there's value in sitting behind the dish too, and getting to see. You can see, ball flight better. You can see location better. You can see, there's a lot of things you can see better from behind the dish.
Yeah.
But I go back and forth when I'm at affiliates between the dugout and in the stands, and it just depends on the guy who's throwing that night, what I might want to see. But to answer the first part of your question, I go out and visit all of our affiliates. We have another pitching coordinator, JP Martinez, who also goes out to all the other affiliates. I guess we're kind of unique in the sense that we don't do upper level and lower level. In other words, there's a lot of big league clubs with 2 coordinators, and one of them will be in A ball on down, and one of them will be high A on up, or double A and triple A. We don't do it that way. We both go out to all affiliates plus the Dominican. So that's 7 spots more or less for me between AAA in Rochester, AA is in Pensacola this year. It was Chattanooga last year. Fort Myers for High A, Cedar Rapids in the Midwest League, Elizabethton in the Appy League, GCL rookie ball, and our Dominican Academy for the DSL and the DIL, which is the Instructional League in the fall, where I went down there for a week in November. So there's 7 spots you'll find me traveling to throughout the year.
Gotcha. And are you writing reports like a scout would, or is this like it just like needs to go into your brain? Like, do you report
I do. I
all
write
this
up. I
stuff to
write
somebody?
notes. Yeah. I write notes after every visit I take, and player wise, staff wise, I share those notes with the pitching coaches after I visit, and all of it is things that we'll have talked about on the visit. But it's a way for me to organize my thoughts afterwards and to commit it better to memory if I write it down, just a paragraph on each guy I saw pitch. And it's good to look at the next time I go, just as a refresher. Okay, we did this drill in the bullpen last time with this guy. Let's see if it's showing up in terms of game results or pitch quality on my next visit. So I think, yeah, I do write notes down after every visit, and I do it more for myself to help commit it to memory better. But it's also good to just send a cap on the 5-day visit or whatever it was with the pitching coaches. So I think it accomplishes a couple of things. Writing up a little blurb after the visits. Yeah.
Yeah. Not on a non-baseball note. What do you do to streamline like all this stuff? Is there like certain software that you like, or the little note-taking apps that you're a fan of? Because I use a ton of technology, like on my phone, on my computer. Also, what do you what's your travel kit like? 'Cause you're traveling a ton. What do you do to get through an airport faster, more efficient? What's your kit?
What do I do to get to an airport
I mean, you
faster?
have like the Hello Kitty luggage set, or like what do you got?
Wildly enough, as much as I have to get in airplanes, I don't have TSA pre-check, which is silly.
It's
The
ridiculous.
reason why I don't have it is that Raleigh-Durham, the airport, is a gem of an airport, and I'd never wait in security for more than 5 minutes. Sure as hell, now that I've said that, next time I go to the airport, I'll wait for an hour. Really bad jinx, but I don't have the TSA pre-check, and it's, speaking of helping to stay organized, my notes section on my phone, I use that frequently for reminders to organize thoughts. That's one of the many things on one of those notes pages, get TSA pre-checked, but it hasn't made it to like the top 20 list recently, so maybe over the next couple of weeks I'll try to get it, but
Maybe Santa's listening.
perhaps.
I got that, I think, 2 years ago. It's like my favorite thing in the world, especially as much as you fly. I mean, it ends up, it's like $85 for 5 years. And yeah, there's some airports that you just cruise through anyway. But then I think for me, the thing I like about it is that you always know that you will get through security in 10 minutes or less. So you can just plan out your airport time better. Like there's no surprises. Like Durham's pretty great, but you could be in Vegas or you could be
Yeah, I
in
could be
Cedar Rapids,
anywhere,
and you have no idea how long it could take. So you have to be like extra cautious and waste time sometimes. That's
yeah,
for
it's
me what I like
silly
about it.
rationale on my part, like, because only half the time I can be assured of minimal wait,
Yeah.
minimal wait time. So that's just a misstep on my part, and I need to get on that.
I was
And
just picturing. Have you ever seen this movie Into the Air with George Clooney?
I've not seen that movie.
It wasn't like a super big one, but he was like this business professional who fires people for a living. So companies hire him to go over and like be an assassin and lay off people for a day. But anyway, he was
Right.
like in the air for like 300 days a year, and they're just like one of the opening scenes is him like going through the airport and just he's got everything perfect. He just like takes off his shoes while he's walking, puts them in this little spot, and his suitcase is real high tech, and he's so streamlined with the airport
The airport
travel.
process.
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
so I was curious if you had any little things that you did that you're like, I figured this out. Saves me
Yeah.
1.6 minutes.
Yeah. One thing, I wrote this down the other day because I thought it was funny. Um, but if you're sitting in the back of the plane and the plane comes to a dead stop and the seatbelt sign comes off, I feel like everybody in the back immediately stands up as if we're going somewhere in the near future. I've learned to finish the next 2 chapters in my book before standing up to get into the aisle to grab my carry-on bag because it takes a long time for the first 130 people to get off the plane. So that's a consider that an airplane travel tip.
Okay,
You
Pete's
know,
travel
finish
tips.
finish finish the chapter. Finish what you're doing. You don't need to rush up as soon as the pilot takes off the fasten seatbelt sign. Because then you just end up waiting, looking at disgruntled, tired people until you
or
get off, right?
or you do especially if you're like at the window seat, you just end up standing there while leaning your head at a 90-degree angle, and then you
Yeah,
end up walking off
ex-
the plane with borderline scoliosis.
exactly.
So what have you been reading? Give me a couple recent books.
Reading right now, finishing up a book called On Mental Toughness. It's a Harvard Business Review compilation of essays on resiliency and mental toughness. So that's a good one. It's it's geared towards corporate world a little bit, which annoys me a little bit, but the message is good. So anytime I see the word corporate athlete in this book, which appears more than once, unfortunately, I just like
Hmm.
sub out in my mind pitcher,
Yeah.
because all the messages are the same. It's like, how do we respond from a traumatic work experience or a bad presentation or getting fired or the ability to tap into your stoic side and be able to just move on to the next thing. What's important now? What's the next thing in front of me? What can I do today? Even though I got this feeling in my gut, even though I'm pitching terribly the last 2 weeks, who cares? What can I do today? What's important now? So that's one of the messages of the book, which we've all heard in coaching and preach as coaches. So it's a book that I've really taken to, and I like it. I accept the whole corporate athlete word that they use all the time.
I don't know if I accept that, but I get it. I
Right.
get it. Yeah, we can't all be athletes, and it's yeah. But I think there's a lot of lessons that go both ways, from the corporate world to the athletics world, from the athletics world to the corporate world for sure.
Well, it's funny because they use the authors in the book use sports examples to say, hey, they do this in tennis. You should do this in your own job, in your own life. Or hey, they do this in golf. PGA golfers do this to recover from a bad round. This is what you can do to have a good presentation next time you have to give a presentation for your boss. So it's all good though, because you can learn. I love to learn from other sports, be it approach mentally above the neck, or even mechanical stuff. If you look at javelin throwers or tennis serves or anything in track and field, you can find something that parallels well with baseball. But yeah, it's a good book. Highly recommend. It's kind of dense. It gets a little nerdy at times, but I recommend it.
Okay. I'll see if I can find it. I'll put it in the show notes if I can in the description. So what?
Okay.
Tell me what else you've got in your. So like you've talked about your progression as a player, then a coach, and obviously you continue to learn and impress people. That's how you continue to climb the ladder. What's part of your all the players have their off season training, their in season workouts, their process, right? Like what is your process to one day get wherever it is that you want to go?
um, that's just learning, man. It's trying to get better, trying to get a little better next year. How can I say this a little bit better next year? What am I teaching right now that's not entirely accurate? Um, you know, there's always a little bit of imposter complex is good. Um, Too much is bad, but a little bit is good. Um, just to check yourself, just to make sure that you're giving the best info and the best advice and coaching you can every year. That's important to me. And then in the off season, something like last week, I went to the Texas Baseball Ranch. Ron Woolforth puts on an event every year where he invites speakers to come talk about pitching. And this past year or last weekend, Brent Strom and Derek Johnson spoke at it. Dewey Robinson, the Tampa Bay Rays pitching coordinator, spoke at it. So attending events like that are important in the off season for me. I will take something from these off season clinics every year. I'll pick up something and put that into my own pitching coaching strategy style, whatever you want to call it. And that's important. I've been really lucky in every place I've worked so far. Like the administration, the head coach, or whoever, the front office has encouraged it, paid for it, and that's I don't take that lightly. I value that. The first one I went to was at Mohegan Sun, the World Baseball Coaches Clinic or convention or whatever they call it. But I can remember, so I was sitting in the car with Raph, the head coach at New Haven at the time, and we're driving there. It's an hour drive, and I remember thinking, "Damn, this is awesome. He's paying for me to go to a baseball convention where people are going to talk for 3 days about how to get better at coaching, and someone's paying for it for me." I thought that was awesome. Super green, a little naive at the time, but I still feel the same way. Whenever my employers paid for me to go to get better, it's like I appreciate that.
Yeah, for sure. So are you a podcast guy in addition to that? Or are you like what do you do when you can't make it to a clinic?
Yeah, I'm a podcast guy. Tim Ferriss podcasts are pretty good. Freakonomics radio podcast I love. So neither of those are baseball related, but
Well, there was one you probably caught it that we had our kids in our organization listen to. It was about I think it was a two-parter. It had a ton of different pro athletes talking about things that help separate them from others. Like Mark Teixeira was in it. Sean
yes,
Johnson. Did you hear that episode? Like a lot of really good insight from a lot of athletes.
I did. I was mowing the lawn when I listened to that. That's what I do to be efficient. Is Let me try to listen to a podcast while I'm mowing the lawn. I feel good after I do both of those things because that's time efficiency.
There you
But
go.
I do remember listening to that a couple months ago while mowing the lawn. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm an audiobooker myself. I don't know if I've only physically read a handful of books in the last year, but audiobooks help me because I can get 10 minutes going to and from the grocery store, half an hour
No doubt.
here, hour there. That's been my thing. I'm
No
starting to get a
doubt.
little more into podcasts now, but you got a guy like me, and I'm like, who is this Dan dude just rambling off? Turn it off, So I try to find something that's going somewhere, rather than some guy who's just going to talk about TSA pre-check for an hour.
Yeah. better watch the New York Times just came out with a, I don't know if it was an op-ed or whatever, but someone came out with something that you don't process or internalize audiobooks as much as you do if you read it, which is a big hit to the Audible industry, the audiobook industry. I just saw it on my Twitter feed yesterday. It's like you remember 83% of what you actually read in writing, and you only remember 50-something% of what you hear on an audiobook. And I was like, dang, if I was a president of Audible, I'd be pissed right now.
See, I
But
don't.
I still use it just the same because, you know, can't always sit down and read a book.
Yeah, and I'm gonna find that study because here's my thing. With every book that I finish, I feel like I remember three things. Like where did the 80,000 words go? Like you can't. So when they're saying you remember 83% of a written read book,
Yeah, right.
what does that mean? I remembered 83,000 words out of 100,000.
Totally
What are
don't
they?
know.
Yeah, that
I
kind of
have
hurts
no
my brain.
idea. Yeah, matter of fact, I didn't even read the whole piece. I
It
just
was an
saw
audio
the.
form.
Yeah, that's a good joke.
There you
I
go.
just saw like the title in the subject line, and that's all I saw. Uh, so
Well,
I got to dive into it. I got to read it, but I saw that and I was like, uh-oh, Audible's
yeah,
not going to be happy.
and I get it. I mean, at a cursory glance, like it makes sense. Like when I'm listening to an audiobook, I'm driving a vehicle, so some part of my brain has to be occupied, like not for processing book material. And then because you're not physically staring at words, you can kind of get lost in your thoughts, which for me I think is kind of a positive because I do that anyway. But
Right?
and one of the things I was talking to one of my buddies about is that when I read a real book, like my mind just is a I have a constant wandering mind, which I think is why like I'm creative in some things. Like I don't think it's a bad quality, but it's a quality. Like I have to control it to
Yeah.
an extent. So when I'm reading a book, I'll just be like flipping pages and I'll be like, "Wait, I didn't read any of the last 12 pages. Let's go back."
Yeah. Happens to me too,
Whereas
man.
whereas with an audiobook, it just kept going. And then you're like, "Okay, I like was kind of tuned in, kind of not." But then you finish the book and you feel like you got most of it. So I can definitely see where like yeah, those 10 minutes where I spaced out because I was dreaming about sea turtles or whatever, those are those are gone forever. Um, and I'm not gonna like go back and rewind all of it. I do rewind sometimes, but my overall point is like even then when you read 100,000 word book or a 10 hour audio book, how much of it does your brain really like store anyway? So I'm just curious to read that study more than anything. So
Yeah, check
here's
it out.
yeah.
I'll have to read the whole thing in full. The bottom line is this: if audiobook's better than no book, right? Like
That's
so.
the other thing, yeah, because you can't read a physical book while you're driving your car or doing all those mowing your lawn. So if you get 53% of something, it's better than 83%
Better
of
than
nothing.
nothing, right? And it's
Yeah,
like I feel like the only time I have to read is when I'm actually in an airplane and don't get the Wi-Fi, and I like have to coach myself to don't get the Wi-Fi because that'll force you to read.
yeah.
So
Well, as we wrap up here, do you have any good stories that uh, you look back as really fond memories of your time at as a college coach or as a player, as a now as a coordinator? Anything that really sticks out to be
I'm just
summarizing?
great. I'm just grateful to have worked for some really good people, good baseball minds, good men. Um, you know, there's so much luck and chance in anyone's career path, and there's just too many outside factors that help people get to where they are. So, you know, any people I've worked for, universities I worked at, really have helped me out. Starting with Raf at New Haven and Coach Beretti well, as a player, and then I've worked for him for 8 years, and Coach Pollard at Duke. I mean, these guys are all super professional and really good at their jobs. So just learning from them. um, and taking any tips, taking any advice, following those guys, the lead, and using that to help kind of craft, your own style, your own voice, um, and your own person. So,
Very
um,
cool.
yeah.
Well, you definitely, one of I think the common themes of our talk today is definitely that you're a voracious learner. And I think a lot of people sometimes forget just how much of a long-term process that is. It's clear through looking at your bio and your progression, and now that you're on track to potentially one day be a big league pitching guy. I think you're in one of the stepping stones towards that job long term. And I don't know if that's your goal or not, but you're continuing to climb the ladder. Despite not being a guy who pitched in the major leagues, and that's definitely something that's changing in baseball, right? I know there's back in the day, like
Right.
20 years ago, there were never guys, who didn't pitch in the majors who would then coach, pro guys. So that's really changed a lot, hasn't it?
Well, it's changed a ton. I mean, when Derek Johnson he went from Vanderbilt to Cubs pitching coordinator like 7 years ago, approximately. That was a wild move that just it wasn't talked about. It went under the radar. I thought it should have been on the bottom line on ESPN on the ticker when that happened, just because there was zero college to pro transition. It just flat out didn't happen. So when he did that, that really eventually opened the door for some college guys to move to the pro side. If he doesn't do that, if he says, "Nah, I'm good, thanks, Theo, I'm going to stay in Nashville because I work with studs here and I love live music," um, like I don't know if uh, I don't know if I get a job with the Twins or Wes Johnson gets a job with the Twins, or there's a number of college guys now with less than stellar playing careers or no pro background playing wise that are working in the pro game now. So it started with him, man. And the fact, and he could have taken that job and not done. What if it didn't go well? What if it didn't turn out good and he was back in college 3 years later? Who knows what happens? Like, so he had to take that job, say yes to it, and be really good at his job. And when those two things happened, then I think some organizations said, okay, this guy just did a great job as a coordinator. Now he's a big league pitching coach, and many people rave about him. Let's try to open the door, see if we can get some more blood in.
Yeah, well, and it sounds like that makes sense for why you're doing your thing because, you know, for a guy like him or a guy like you, they stand before a guy, a big clubhouse full of pros and major leaguers, and those guys say, well, what do you know? Like, I played at a higher level than you ever did. And I think it
Right.
comes back to what you said is that when you treat them with respect and you treat them with like people and you just help them to understand,
Help them get
yeah,
better. Yeah.
yeah, that then they buy in like, okay, this guy, yeah, he was a college coach, but he really cares about me and he knows what he's talking about, and I feel like what he's doing is going to help me. So then I think that's where you guys just realize it's a shared goal, and then it doesn't matter what your background was.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, you said it perfectly. Um, yeah, and I've never coached at a level that was um, at the same level I played at. I've only coached at with players who are better better than the level I played at. So that's kind of unique. I think a lot of coaches don't share that same quality. But I played Division III baseball and started at D2, and then just climbed up some. But it's kind of unique, I think. Um,
Well, and I'm sure you. It sounds like you didn't. You approach that with the idea like I have to pull myself up and be really good and like prove that I belong here and that I can do this job. And it seems like that's a commonality amongst high performers as well. Like they don't, like you said with Derek Johnson, like he got that job, and I'm sure he's like, I'm gonna kill this and I'm gonna make this work, and I'm gonna work super hard and put in the hours and prove that I belong here. I think every player or coach at some point they get promoted, whatever it is, they want to immediately prove that they belong. So I think that's probably why lots of guys end up outperforming. Maybe like for me, like I'm a 6 foot right hander, and like
Yes, love
I
six
did,
foot right-handers. Underrated.
but they have to prove every day that they belong on the field because people think they're like a second baseman, you know.
Right. No doubt.
And that
No
was
doubt.
what my previous guest last week, Dave Swanson, he was talking about Josh Tomlin from the Indians, and he's like, he's the most unassuming guy. He's barely 6 foot and barely throws 90, but he does everything in his power to prove that he belongs on that field. And so yeah, so I get it. Well, hey Pete, how
There's
can
no
people?
replacement for that motor.
No, absolutely. So how can people follow up with you if they want to follow you and stay in tune with what you're doing?
Oh shoot. I didn't know you were gonna ask that.
You out there on the interwebs?
I'm not a big Twitter guy. I'm not a big social media guy. I mean, I'm on it, but I don't like post. I'm
Just
not
incognito.
incognito is right.
Well, here's
I
what we can
think
do. We can start a
is that
crowdfunding.
is that I don't know. It's not balance. I take, but I don't give back to the Twitter community. That's probably not
All right.
not
So
best for karma.
so Pete's just lurking in the shadows, ready to leap out and steal information whenever possible.
Yeah.
No, but what we can do is we can start a crowdfunding thing for you to get you TSA pre-check. So if you want to be involved and help Pete get through airport security at all his visiting airports, then we can set that up. So
I'll take
your
it.
donation, yeah, even a nickel will get him towards his goal.
I will take it.
Um, but yeah, well, hey, I appreciate you being on the show. I think this was an awesome talk. I mean, I didn't know what a pitching coordinator does. I think people hear the term a lot. I think what people do in pro ball, what the coaches do, like the day to day of it. I think is kind of mystified, and so I appreciate you kind of telling your story today and going through
Yeah,
some of
man.
the details of it.
Happy I could help. I enjoyed it. Thanks, Dan.
All right, well, you have a great warm Durham Christmas, and we'll talk again soon.
All right. Merry Christmas. Talk soon.
All right, well, that about wraps it up for today. I want to again thank my guest, Pete Maki. Wish him the best next year with the Twins. And I want to thank you again for stopping in here. Remember, you can find this episode. You can also find video versions on YouTube. We don't have video with myself and Pete today, but some of our guests, we do record this on video. But all of them are on Spotify, Stitcher, iTunes, YouTube, and danblewett.com, my personal website. So, thanks again, and we'll catch you here next week on Dear Baseball Gods.